Hi everyone, welcome to RPA Explorers channel.
In this video, we are going to look about queue connector methods, and also in one of my previous video we have explored how you can create queue and the different options while creating it. So this is the queue which we have created already, and also have explained all these options in my last video itself. Last video we have created the queue in the list view, and now what I have opened is the table view. In order to access the table view, go to service now and filter with queues. Then you can just click on this queue. So this will open up the table view. In case you want to open the list view, you have to filter with RPA and then directly you can navigate this. And from here you have to follow the steps that we did last time. Both are same. And now let's continue with the table view. And I have already added my queue connector, which is called queue, and in the properties I have given the name of the queue as well. So just click on it and go to the properties. You can see the name and queue name, and you have to provide the queue name from the RPA hub. So this is a queue name which I have copied and provided over here. In case your queue name is getting changed, make sure you update your value in the studio also. Now let's look at the different method. So we have create, get, pick, update and release work item. So let's understand what is create work item first, and before which we also go through the documentation one, official documentation from ServiceNow for queue connector method, and also there are some prerequisites which you have to follow before you use the method. Like you have to assign your bot process and adding your global connector, providing the name in the properties plane, and also you have to use the same name as per the RPA hub. And the very first step is to create your work item, for which we have two methods. One is by using a JSON format, and the second which is using a string item. So let's understand what is a JSON format. A JSON format is nothing in which you have some key and its corresponding value. Based on the key you get the value. So in that way you can have n number of keys and value, which should be separated by a common separator. This is just a single key and value, and in case you have multiple keys and values, you have to follow this method. So this is the first key or value pair, and this is the second one which got separated by comma. So in this way you can have multiple key value pair separated by a common separator. So this is the JSON format. And also for string format, you can have any certain format in which you can add your items to your queue. So let's go to the studio and let's see how you can add your items. So first I'm going to concentrate on create work item. So let's drag and drop this create string work item, and second is create JSON work item. So if you look at both the methods, for the first method we don't have any additional option wherein you can provide any additional fields or any properties, but for the JSON item you have something settings in which you can provide your properties. So this property is nothing but key. For example, you can add your key and you can click on OK, which can automatically get added over here. In that way you have to provide your key and value to the JSON work item. But for the string work item you don't have any separate properties wherein you can provide your key and values together. Something called request content, but not individual property. Request content in create string work item is just accept the string in the format you give. Then providing key and values indeed separately, we are going to pass it as a single request content which will be in the format of string. So let's take a look at the pick work item so that you get to know why we are trying to pass the string work item in the JSON format. So if you take the pick work item, there is an option to provide the JSON properties. For example, you have to provide the properties over here. So let me give something called property 1 and I'll click on OK. So when you click on property 1, this property 1 is nothing but your key. The value which it gives will be a value. So make sure you always have your key and value, whether it is a string work item or JSON work item. The only difference is that for string you have to provide everything together as a string content, and for JSON you have to provide your key, values, everything as an individual content. So let's see how you can use your create string work item now. So let's remove this. This example we have an sample Excel which we are going to use for the queue connector method. So now let's look at the project folder. And in the input I have something called add. So I have sheet 1 in which I have 5 different columns. Header will be my key and its corresponding rows will be my values. So based on the ID we are going to get the value from each row. So let's see how you can build this now. And for this I have already added my Excel connector, which is Microsoft Excel, and I have used my open method, in which I am using the same Excel. First step is to open your Excel, for which I am passing my file path, which is add queue Excel, and then we are reading the sheet, which is from the sheet 1, and I am using the list component, which is called get list item. So you just have to drag and drop this, and at the top you have an option to provide your index. So you have to provide your index based on the column. So I'll start from 1 to 4, which is from column A to E. And then we have to pass your request content in the format of JSON. So in order to achieve this, I'm going to pick the format text. There might be different way, and I'm approaching this way as it would be much easier. So let's drag and drop this format text. So once you drag and drop it, and you might not see any input parameter. All you see is just an output parameter, which is of type string. So just let's click on this. Okay, as I already mentioned, this ID would be my key and its corresponding value would be my value. So what I'm going to do is that, so every JSON format will be covered inside the in the curly bracket. So I'm just having my curly bracket and then my quotes. For providing my key, I have my quotes and separated by comma, which would be my 0 index. So here I have to pass the 0 index from the column from the Excel. So similarly, let's add, okay, I think this is a role, not a country. So let's keep it as role. We have formatted the text, in which we have added the column value and its respective index for the string output. So we have our column ID and name, so level, city. So we have 5 keys and its respective 5 values as well. So let's click on OK now. And once you click on OK, you don't see any input parameters automatically created. So all you have to do is just click on this plus icon. So we have 4 indexes, so I'm going to pass all my index to this. It's not necessary that you have to pass your 0 index to this 0 format text. Depends on the input and you can pass it to anything. So I'm just going. So now that we have passed all the values from the Excel to the format text, and also we have to pass the data table to the instance of get list item. Okay, now let's just run this to see its output. So I'm going to start this. So okay, we have an error. Let's look at the error. So instead of looping through it, we are directly trying to pass the entire data table to the reflection item. So we have that error. Let me use for each, and then you have to pass the collection of data table to this collection, and then we'll see the output. This object. So let's run this now. Okay, this is completed without any error. So let's look at the output of the format text. So what you have to do is, instead of using an additional show component, you can directly click on the output port. Just right click on this and you have an option to preview data. So click on preview data. We got the 10th index because we are previewing the value once the bot got completed, so which is the last index 10. In case you want to view each and every data, you have to pass a message box. In that way you can see the index from 1 to 10. Clear the log, and this output we have to pass as a request content to the queue. So if you remember, when we create the queue, there was an option called is name should be unique or not, which we enabled it already. So this means that when you create your work item, so here is where we can see all the work items. So when you create it, you want your work item to be unique with the name, or it can also have some duplicate name. And in my case, I want only the unique name, so I have just enabled it. In that way it avoid adding any duplicates. So for the name, what I'm going to pass is, I'm going to use the ID from column A, which is from the index 0. So we can directly pass this to the name, And the next field, which is type, which is of type string. So you can have anything as a type. For example, you have some 1,000 rows and you are separated, and you have some group. For example, you are separating by the role, or you are separating by the country or city, which can be your group. So that you can pass it to this type. Then you can directly view the work item that belongs to the specific type. So it is nothing but grouping your work item based on certain value. So for example, when you have some type, you can just choose the field as type here, and then you can filter your type. So in my case, let's assume that we are going to provide the type as role, so that we can filter the software engineer together, and data analyst as together, and financial analyst as together. So in order to achieve this, let's create some duplicates as well. For example, let's replace 3 software engineer, and we'll have 2 data scientists. So we are going to use column E role as a type, so which is the 5th column. So I'm going to pass the column B. And similarly, you have something called stage. For example, you want some additional stage to be given for each work item, which you can give. For example, you can provide this is from stage A, this is from stage B, which you can give it. And I'm not going to use this. So this is also similar to type, in which you can filter it, and you can also do the same with the stage. Which what we have is priority. So for each item you have something called priority. This will also be helpful when you have some more item and you want a specific item to be processed first. As I mentioned, let's assume that I want role which has software engineer to be processed first. Then you can have some condition over here, like you can have some decision. If the 5th row, which is equal to software engineer, then you can mark the priority as high, critical. So in that way, bot goes to the critical first, then it comes with high, moderate and low. So we have 4 different priorities for work item, which you can do. And for now, I'm just going with a single priority for all my work item, which is just high. And the output of these would be a work item ID. So each work item you have something called ID, which can be useful when you are updating or when you are releasing a work item. When I go to the method release work item, there is something called work item. For example, when you are updating or releasing a work item. So let's close this. So now we are done with the development. So let's just run this and see the output. Now we have error on top of queue method. Let's look at the error, which says please use assign bot process method to provide configuration. Okay, so we have that as a prerequisite in the queue documentation, where we have to assign your bot process in order to access anything from RPA hub. So it is not just for queue. If you want to interact with anything in the RPA hub, make sure your bot process is assigned. So now let's go ahead and assign our bot, for which you have to click on this assign bot process. So select your bot process, and these are all the bot process which we downloaded from ServiceNow as a part of RPA sample template. In case you haven't watched that video, make sure you watch and download this bot process. It's not just you have to use only these. In case you have your own bot process, you can also use it. But for now, I'm just going with some random one. So let's use the first one. And also you have to select the robot. So as soon as I select my bot process, I have this issue. It says that I don't have permission to use the robot for the selected bot process. It means that for my bot process, which is clear browser cache, I don't have any robots assigned. First, let's go ahead and assign that. So you have to go to your process, which is browser clear cache. So I'm just going with this browser clear cache. And you have something called credential sets, in which you have to create your credentials. So I have already added mine, wherein you just have to provide your name. So you can provide any name and your Windows username and your Windows password. So I have already created this, like I have provided robot credentials, added my username and the password. Okay. And the next step after you create your credential set would be assign your robot. So go to the assign robot and click on add. So once you click on add, you can view the available robots over here. As I have already added mine, I cannot see it now, but you can see it as soon as you create it. And the next step is to go to the process robot credentials, and you have to select the credential set that you have created, which is robot credential, and the robot which you have already created, which is called my robot. Before you create your credential assets or assign your robot, make sure you have your robot, which I have already explained in one of my previous video, and I'll give the link in the description as well. So you just have to follow those steps to create your robot, and you have to assign it to the bot process. So you have something called assign studio user, and here you have to give access to the user you are using. So in my case it is system administrator, so I just click on here, and you have to search for system administrator, then select this and you have to add it. So once these two steps are done, go to your queues and open the queue. So you have 3 tabs as soon as you create it. So go to the third tab, which is bot process configuration, and whichever process you want to use the given queue, make sure you add that queue. For example, I'll click on add here, so you can see all the available process over here. So you just have to click on this and click on that, which can be done in the list view and in the table view as well. So let's go ahead and do it in the table view. So let's click on edit, and here you see the collection of process you already have. Let's go ahead and select this and let's add it, and you have to save this. So now this is done. Let's refresh the page and see. So let's refresh it. So everything is done. Now let's go back to the studio and let's try to assign it, and we'll click on assign bot process. And also now if you try to select the other process, we still have that error. Okay, now let's run the process. So this is executing, and also we can see that it is blinking. So for each index it is trying to create a work item in the queue. Let's go ahead and look at the queue. So this is the queue, and currently we don't have any work item. So let's try to refresh the page and see. So if you see, we have all the rows from the Excel as a work item in the queue. So currently we have 12 rows, so excluding the header we have 11 rows which get added here. So whenever the work item gets added to the queue, the initial status, which is called pending, so once the bot picks the item, it becomes in progress. So based on the status, we have to update it to stay success or failure. So currently this is name, which is kind of unique, so we don't have any duplicates over here. And this is the status, as it is new, we have pending. And also you can see the priority for all the work item, which is high. And also in case you want to see more fields here, so just click on this and you can add the fields over here. For example, I'm going to add the request content. Let's add the SLA to here, and let's click on OK. So okay, this is response content. Let's add the request content. Click on OK, and now you can see the request content like this. For example, you can just open anything and you can see the content over here. So in the details tab, you can see the type. So what we have given type is the role, so you can see this here. In case you have the states and the SLA, which can be viewed from here, and also you can see the transaction activity. For example, if it gets retried or failed or success, you can see its activity over here. And also you can see the current attempts count, which is currently 0 because we haven't processed it or retried it. And right now I'm just going back. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to disable this and I'll update the queue. And now we have disabled the work item named unique. So let's try to re-trigger the process. So let's go to the queue. Okay, it moved to the list view. So you have 22. As we have disabled this item, it is trying to add the duplicates, as we have 2 work items for each name show. So if you disable and run the process now, you still see the same work item. So let me save this and run the process again. So we cannot see anything. Okay, so I'm going to see what is his work item ID and his name exists. So let's print the work item ID. In order to view its ID, we have to enable it. In that way, bot can add the item and we can view each work item. So I'm just going to disable this. Let's run the process and see. And also I'm going to add a breakpoint here so that we can stop whenever it is needed. So let's start the process. And now the item is created in the queue. So let's have a look. So this is the latest item. You can start with this created. So I'll go with the latest one. So let's open this item and let's try to print the ID now. So I'm going to click on move next. So you can see this ID, right? So let's see where you can see this ID here. If you go to the URL, and the head of the URL you can see the work item ID for each work item in the queue. So we have this work item, so which is unique for each item in the queue. So let's click on OK and let's run the process now. So I'm going to click on continue, which is run, and again we have the work item ID which is for the second item. So let's open the second item, just refreshing this, and we have one, so which starts with 80 something, and you can see the same ID over here. So this is how you can get the work item ID which is unique for each item. And the property is name exists. It depends on the name which we give as a reference to the queue. So the name, if it is already existing in the queue, then you get the value for this is name exists as true. So we have already added all the rows from the Excel to the queue, so it validates that if the given name is already exist on the queue. Since the name already exists, the value which we get is true. Now we are going to add an additional row to check this property is name exists, and I'm adding a new row. So let's create one set one column and let's give some random value like a so let's save the Excel, let's close it, and now let's run the plot and see. And also let's preview its value. So if you see, the value for the name is 13, it's not present in the queue already, so the value of this should be false now. So let's run, and if you see the value which is false, so this property which is depending on this name, so make sure the name you are giving which is not already existing. So based on your requirement you can use this property whether to be exist or you can add any duplicate value. So I'm just going to proceed with that to see the next value. And now let's take a look at the name, which is 12, which we already have in the queue. So we already have 12 values. Okay, so let's proceed, and if you see the value which is true, so this is how you can make use of this property. And also we have something called stage, and for the stage, for this example I'm just going to have my third column as stage. Let's see. And also after I process all my rows, I want to close the Excel as well, for which you have to use the close method from Excel connector, and I am closing it after I process all my rows, so which comes at the end of the for loop. And now let's run the process and see. And this time we have given the parameter for stage. So let's go to this and see the output. And if you notice here, for the previous execution we don't have any stage, but for this we have the stage. So even you have multiple rows and you have bulk amount of data to be added to your queue, so in that way you can have some specific stage which you can just filter it. For example, let me take this one and we'll try to filter with this, for which you have to click on this and you have different filter options, so you can just choose anything. And I'm going to paste this. Let's click on apply. So currently we have only one stage with this, so I have only one thing. And also instead of having the third value as C, I'm going to have the fifth value which is role as my stage. So let's run the process again. To remove the filter, you have this option here, remove filter, so you can see everything. And now you can see the stage as a role here, and let's filter with software engineer. So let's use other filter, and with software engineer we have 3 different items, so you can view all these items, and also based on the requirement you can change the priority as well. Okay, so this is how you can make use of these filters in queue. And for status also you have something called you can filter with pending. So you see all these 3 items, and now I'm going to remove this filter and you can see all these items over here. So currently we have 64 items, and also you can filter with something called success, failure. So for example, we have 3 success. So once the bot is processed, you would see that the started on, completed date, and the robot. Actually I have marked all these 4 items manually as success, so I will not be seeing my robot here. So this is how we can make use of this filter, and here also we do have that filter. So this is about the create string work item, in which we have created the work item in the JSON format. The same way you can create your item in the JSON format as well. So for which I already have my activity created. Let me open this, which is create JSON. So this is the create JSON with my Excel, reading the sheet, and everything is same until we get the list of items from the Excel. So after we get, instead of having a format text or external activity to convert it to JSON format, in the same in the create JSON work item activity itself, we can provide all our JSON property. So you just have to click on this icon. Here you have an option to add your properties, and currently we have only 5 properties. So I have added my properties and given my name like this. So you have to give it any name. As soon as you add your properties and click on OK, you can view all the properties being added as input parameter over here. So what you can do is you can just simply give your name, type, stage, SLA, ID, and the name, and the rest of the column which comes from the Excel. So column which is the name, so it's the third column. So the second column which is the name, and third, fourth column. And also now let's see how you can make use of this SLA. Basically SLA is something timestamp before which the execution needs to be completed. And to click on this port prop. Today is 17/4/2024, and I'm randomly going to give that 4, before which I want all my work item with the SLA needs to be processed. So let's click on OK. So now let's run the process and see the output. So let's click on run from here. And now the execution is completed. So let's look at the work item. And by default you won't get all the fields here, so you can add the fields you want. So I'm going to edit my columns, which is SLA, and let's add it over here. So let's see the SLA. So you can weave the SLA over here. Okay, so this is how you can add your SLA, and when the bot picks, it gives preference based on the SLA. So this is how you can make use of this SLA. And now let's look at the request content. So this is the request content which is same as the previous one. The reason we are creating a string item in the JSON format is when you use other methods like pick work item or get work item, you have an option to provide your JSON property. So that is the reason you always make sure that you have some key and its respective value, and it need not to be in the same format as JSON. Whatever it is, make sure that you have something key and its value. In that way, irrespective of the create method, you can make use of this pick work item to get your item. So this is about the create JSON work item and create string work item. So in the next video we are going to see the rest of the method, which is get, pick, release and update your work item. You all got an idea about these two methods, and thank you so much for watching my video till the end. Thank you.